Greetings, friends! My name is Optimistic Gamer, and welcome to another Mythology 101 episode, a series dedicated to bringing you the tools that you need to be your own mythologist. Today, we're talking about a contentious word when it comes to mythology, or at least a contentious word when it comes to internet videos and how they present the stories, information, and facts of, say, your favorite video games. And that word is everybody's favorite word, lore. We all love a good Dark Souls lore video, or an essay on the hidden lore of Five Nights at Freddy's, or even the deep and ever-evolving lore of, I don't know, say the Garfield fandom. But the problem has come about, at least in my experience, that we've conflated the word lore to mean the same thing as myth or mythology. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of overlap between lore and myth. In fact, myth is entirely based upon lore, and lore itself can be inherently mythological. But I do want to make the distinction because, one, I think it's important to understand where the hard data that is lore ends and the analytical process of mythology begins. And two, because I don't want my channel mistaken for strictly a lore channel that's just going to be an info dump of a piece of work's story and elements contained therein. Rather, I want to analyze said information using outside tools. And lastly, I also want to state that the presence of lore does not mean that something is mythological. And I think I can explain the difference using two very beloved video games that both set out to use lore in very different ways. When I initially started writing this script, I reached out to all of my social media platforms, my community on Discord, and even my personal Facebook to see what people thought lore was. I got quite a wide range of answers, from lore is unimportant background information that fleshes out the larger world of a piece of fiction, to lore being scaled back mythology, i.e. the fictional stories without gods or heroes, but rather random stories within a culture, or lore being the precursor to myths becoming mainstream ideology. Each idea set up posts that marked the boundaries within what they thought lore might be. But a lot of these definitions I was given were based on how a person used them in their day-to-day conversations rather than anything denotative. The thing about a lot of the ideas I was given was that it was actually too restrictive of denotative definitions of lore. You see, lore isn't just the little, unimportant, or background pieces of a particular subject. The term lore actually refers to any and all information of a given subject. Look at how the Oxford Languages Dictionary defines lore as a body of traditions and knowledge on a subject or belief held by a particular group, typically passed from one person to another by word of mouth. A body of traditions doesn't just mean the background knowledge or perhaps what led to the traditions. It's the entire thing. It's the body, the collective umbrella of all things pertaining to a subject. Also, the notion that lore is passed on from person to person, it shows us that lore is both past knowledge and iterations of something, but is also the current notions as well, and it emphasizes that lore is something to be shared and passed on. Merriam-Webster asserts that lore is, again, a particular body of knowledge or tradition, while also stating that lore is something that is learned, whether that lore is a set of traditional knowledge or beliefs, or knowledge gained through study or experience. This definition shows the academic, studious, or intriguing aspects of the idea of lore. It places an emphasis on the notion that lore is something to be engaged with and learned over time. And Dictionary.com repeats both of the previous points while adding an outmoded definition when lore is used to mean the process or act of teaching, or when referring to something that is taught, which paints the idea of lore as, again, an act of learning about something. In essence, lore can be seen as a blanket term for any and all information that relates to a specific subject, topic, belief, or area of knowledge. It's an effort to catalog and categorize and understand the collective information with the idea that it can be shared. Think of any religion, belief system, area of study, or knowledge, and all the stories, whether fictive, mythical, or entirely real, and how every bit of that information plays a role in the shaping of said subject, and how all of that goes into creating a tapestry of knowledge, thus making the idea of lore a vast pool of information to be gathered together and drawn from. It's not just the little bits of information, nor is it just the main points, it's every bit of information that is relevant to the matters at hand. To put this into a real-world example, let's apply this to a real-world area of myth. Let's say Norse. If we wanted to look at the lore of Norse mythology, we'd have to look at everything, not just the background information or singular characters, and not just the bits of information surrounding Norse and Scandinavian culture. We'd have to look at every story within Norse mythology, the characters, the setting, the plots within, the rites and rituals of Norse culture, the day-to-day life of Norse individuals, the chronological history behind the multitudes of Norse and Scandinavian groups, and the biographies of the people within them, the signs and the symbols they used. Literally all of this and more is actually lore. Lore is not some self-contained, limited thing. Lore is best thought of as raw data. It's any and all information related to a particular subject. And I use the word data on purpose, which is weird because this is a channel about mythology. It's not math, but data is merely a term for collected information, and the gathering of a story is information, even if it's not necessarily quantifiable. So where does lore end and mythology pick up? Well, let's start with what lore is at its most basic level, which is just a collection of information. Let's pick a data set as an example. Let's say the lore of a favorite video game of mine and many other lovers of horror, Dead by Daylight. I actually sat down and read through every single piece of DVD lore, every character bio, every in-game lore tome, every item description, every dev blog and interview I could find, and then I gathered all of this information into a mass data set. This data set of all that information makes up the lore of Dead by Daylight. However, once we start applying lenses for analyzing mythology to Dead by Daylight, we see that DVD actually lacks mythological elements like myth themes. A lot of the lore is only surface level storytelling and information that gives plot and reason to the convergence of all these violent killers and terrorized survivors. Its only real purpose is to justify why they're all there. There's no real commentaries tapping into the depths of human fear or violence, which is a theme at the forefront of the game. There's no specific or common cultural influences that are being used for anything other than aesthetic. Take Rin Yamaoka, the killer known as Spirit, for example. While her background tells a tragic tale of the collapse of family and potentially the catastrophic stresses of modern Japanese work culture, there's no deeper commentary, no statements about these issues, no symbolic usage of Japanese themes. This can be said for all the killers, survivors, and settings of Dead by Daylight. So here we have lore, but no myth. And let's take a look at our other example, the Dark Souls trilogy. Dark Souls is renowned for its lore because of its deep complexity and interspersed storytelling that allows players and Soulsian scholars to theorize and speculate on many aspects of the worlds of Lordran, Drangleic, and Lothric. Dark Souls is a massive well of lore that we can gather the same way as we did with Dead by Daylight, collecting character dialogue, cutscene information, item descriptions, developer interviews, and expert Soulsian lore theories all together into a nice, neat pile of information, which constitutes the lore of Dark Souls, the dataset of Dark Souls, if you will. Dark Souls also utilizes a vast amount of mythological themes from all over real-world human history to tell its story, which is one of societal woes, philosophical questions about morality and mortality, and how the individual person relates and navigates their place in the greater world, among other themes, which makes Dark Souls intensely mythological when set against Dead by Daylight. So here we have a data set that is dripping with mythology. And here lies the distinction between lore and myth. Dead by Daylight and Dark Souls both have lore. And as we've said constantly, lore is merely an all-encompassing set of data. However, Dead by Daylight lacks mythological qualities, which illustrates that lore is just a collection of knowledge. Because Dark Souls has mythological qualities, the lore is in fact mythological. And this is the distinction that I would urge other video essayists to make, which is a distinction that I want to make clear with my channel. The mere existence of a story does not make for a myth. It has to have more qualities beyond the superficial use of mythological themes. And how do we make that distinction? Well, this is where lore ends entirely and mythology picks up. As analytical mythologists here on this channel, we employ outside methods of understanding to analyze myths that lie within a particular piece of work. The thing is, using those outside methods of analysis isn't part of something's lore. For example, applying archetypal psychology to understand the psychological and social interactions and the symbolic nature of the Greek pantheon of gods might lead us to a better understanding of our psyche as being represented in a symbolic human form. But that's not necessarily representative of Greek culture, Greek religion, or Greek life, and it's definitely not something that the Greeks were doing, since archetypal psychology didn't really take form until the early 20th century. Here in this example, we are using an outside tool to understand the subject matter and are stepping out of the bounds of Greek lore itself and into the analysis of Greek lore. And to be clear, I am not at all trying to throw shade at Dead by Daylight, its community, nor its developer team. Behavior knows I've definitely put my fair share of hours into the game. Me saying something isn't mythological isn't a bad thing. There's plenty of room for analysis of its fictive elements. It is, however, not a myth, just a story, which I love me a good story. I'm just trying to use an example to illustrate a point. And on a further note, I really have no problem with people who use lore and myth interchangeably. Intent and context go a long way in interpreting what people mean, but for this channel, I feel like I need to make that distinction. In summation, it's best to view the term lore for an all-encompassing data set of just about anything relevant to a culture or topic. Lore itself is not inherently mythological, but it is the basis of study when looking at myths. All the collected data of a given culture, its stories, and its history are the lore, and lore can be mythological under the right circumstances. Thank you, my friends, for joining me today. Let me know if there's anything about all this that you need cleared up. This can be a bit of a confusing topic of semantics because it all boils down to like an not all whiskeys are bourbons, but all bourbons are whiskeys, or a not all Christians are Catholic, but all Catholics are Christians sort of situation. Or in this instance, not all lore is mythological, but all mythology is based in studying some kind of lore. Trying to make this palatable and interesting was super tough, so I'd love to hear your thoughts, or let me know what your takeaway is at the end of this video. And if you're wondering how you can help support and actively influence videos in the future, consider subscribing to my Ko-fi. Ko-fi is a creator-focused platform that offers all kinds of ways for creators to monetize their content while providing benefits to those who donate. And the best part is 100% of the money you donate goes right to the creator. No middleman, no platforms skimming massive fees off the top. And for my Ko-fi subs, y'all get a special Discord role. You get Ko-fi exclusive updates, posts, and spoilers about future or current projects. You get your name in the videos. And you also get access to the first draft for all of my scripts, so I can get early feedback to further refine my writing, and you get access to a video's content months in advance. Not sponsored, by the way. I just love this little platform. Make sure to follow me on Twitter for regular postings, TikTok for goofs, and Twitch for more regular gaming content and upcoming charity streams. But before I go, I submit this to you. Myth is a word that gets thrown around a lot. We use myth when we mean fiction, and not necessarily when we mean culturally, societally, and personally defining myths. And despite my protestations here as to myth being a serious topic that needs clear boundaries, I think our free use of the term myth speaks to something. It speaks to myth's calling as something deeper than surface level. Because I think we all desire myth on some subconscious level, but we don't always know how to find myth. Hopefully, we can all regain what it means to once again be enraptured by mythology. Until next time, my friends, be well and be loved.